Hi, it's Brian Lambert with Orchestrate Sales, and I want to talk to you about getting started in sales enablement. Have you been thinking about getting into the sales enablement profession? Are you curious about what sales enablement is? Have you looked around on the internet and you've realized that there are so many opinions and so many different options and opportunities that you're trying to figure out which end is up? Well, stay tuned for this video where I break it down for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And I hope you enjoy this, and I look forward to your comments and feedback as we explore how to get into sales enablement. Now, what I love about sales enablement is it's a growth sport. Nothing happens in sales enablement unless you do it in partnership with other groups and other people. It is probably one of the most dynamic professions in the digital economy because it's not grounded to any specific silo and it's not aligned to any one specific function. In other words, it is what you make of it. And sales enablement has been rapidly evolving and growing, especially in the last 5 years. It's a team sport. You work with marketing, you work with sales, you work with training, you work with HR, you can even work with finance, operations, engineering. It all depends on what is happening inside your company and what your business strategy is. So let's talk about what I'm going to share with you in this video. I'm going to break down why sales enablement is on fire so you can make a decision about whether or not sales enablement is right for you. I will talk about the different types or domains of sales enablement, the components of sales enablement, how to get into sales enablement, and the future of sales enablement. I'll break all those down and put it into chapters for you so that you can obviously make your own decision, but also comment, provide feedback, and maybe even send this video to others to see what their perspective is. And that's one of the key things about being in sales enablement is understanding other people's perspectives, especially around what is valuable to them, because oftentimes it's not going to match what you think. And that's one of the keys about sales enablement. So why is sales enablement on fire? If I ask you what is sales and what is enablement, how would you answer that? Well, if you take 10 people and line them up, you'll probably get 10 different answers. So I will frame that out for you and let's explore that. First of all, what is sales? Well, sales is about transactions. There's no way around it in sales enablement. You're talking about transactions, you're talking about sales, you're talking about what's called bookings. It's the idea of a contract between a business, usually one business selling to another business. Usually you see sales enablement in what we call B2B. Now, it's important to realize that markets don't write checks, people do. You're talking about helping salespeople and helping customer-facing people talk to other people. Now, this is really important. It's about conversations. Markets don't write checks, people do. The challenge today in most B2B companies is that buyers have all the control. Now, there's a lot out there that you can listen to and learn about, but the bottom line is they actually are struggling. These buyers are struggling with what to buy and how to buy it. You may have heard of cloud. There's a whole bunch of evolution in what is valuable to customers, and they're struggling to figure out what to buy. At the same time, you're going to hear, well, 75% of buying decisions are made up before anybody ever talks to sales. This is the challenge in the selling motion, in the idea of the selling and marketing system, that system of growth. It all depends on how you frame it out. And that's one of the things about sales enablement. How you think about it, how you frame it out is important. Also, buyers are struggling to figure out what they need to do to be successful. They don't know. There's so many people inside of companies. There's so much change happening, so many changes within their own organizational chart. People are doing different jobs that they were hired for. There are people coming, there are people going. It's a digital world. They're working from home. It's hard to even find the right type of information and get access to the right people. That means their challenges are bigger. As a customer, as a buyer, their challenge is bigger. It's becoming more and more cross-functional to get something done. And quite frankly, that's difficult, especially in a digital environment. Also, getting people to agree, getting people to see and agree what's possible is becoming more and more difficult. And they're more risk averse, especially in a rapidly changing, volatile uncertain world. Buyers are becoming more risk averse. They want the sure thing. They don't like to be dictated to. They don't like to be told. And that's the same in a lot of transactions, even transactions you've made. You probably don't like being told what to do either. The funding that people need to bring together to buy larger and larger platforms or more sophisticated solutions, the funding exists in a lot of different pockets across the buyer's organization, which means everybody needs to chip in. Well, how do you get people to chip in when they're not even sure what problem they're trying to solve? This is the challenge of selling today and helping drive transactions. At the same time, it's not just about the initial sale, it's about adoption, it's about using, it's about changing, it's about bringing something into a company and having it change how they work. And that's what buyers have to navigate, is that change management. And they need help with that. And that means they have to teach their internal colleagues, their peers, even their own teams how to work together differently. And the bottom line is that companies struggle with this as buyers of technology, platforms, or other services. It's not quite clear how to navigate this. And this is the help that buyers need in order to be successful, in order to make that commitment to gather enough resources, to gather enough momentum internally to make a purchase, whether it's a shiny, awesome platform, SaaS offering, or something that's more operational, that keeps the lights on. It's getting more and more difficult to make those purchase decisions. So sales organizations need more help than ever, and this is the challenge that Sales Enablement is seeking to address. And this is why Sales Enablement is continuing to grow. If you look at it, there are two lenses to this. One is the market. What is the Sales Enablement market? Well, according to markets, it's growing by 20% a year. It's about $2.6 billion in 2024. That's the forecast. At the same time, the role has been exploding in 2022. Now, why is that? Well, it could be, you could assume, well, it's a huge market and there's a lot of jobs being created. And that's what the data says. But why? And it has to do with the struggles that sales teams have in communicating value and the help that they need, compounded by the digital economy, the digital growth that's happening. More and more companies are moving to the cloud. And we've had things like global pandemics that have cut travel. And when you look at it that way, it's easy to understand the need to lean into technology in the platform side on the left, as well as maybe take some of those travel dollars and divert those travel dollars over to sales enablement roles to help sellers get what they need. So this could be part of the factors of why the role has been growing. And there's so many openings, there's so many jobs available, it's exciting. The question is what is it? What is sales enablement? In late 2021, Scott Santucci and I did a State of the Sales Enablement research. You can find that on our website at orchestratesales.com. If you go there, click on the research tab, you'll see about the research we did. And this is what the challenge was. What is sales enablement? It's a bit of a platypus. What is it? It depends on how you look at it. Can you imagine if you came across this thing and you were like, what is this? And you never seen it before? That's a little bit about how people think about sales enablement today. They're stumbling across it. It's like, is it cool? Is it pretty? Is it ugly? What is this thing? Is it a duck? Is it an otter? Is it a beaver? What is it? And that's what's going on in sales enablement. Even since I've been in it, which I got into the field in 2008, when there were about 1,000 jobs in enablement, I've seen it rapidly explode, and there's still debates around what it is. In fact, when we did our State of Sales Enablement research, Scott Santucci asked, what business is sales enablement in? Is it a transformational business that sales enablement is in, or is it about how we simplify our commercial system, or is it none of the above? You can pause this video and take a look at some of these quotes, but it's a bit, depends on who you ask, and it's about perspective. Some of the people that are in the role for a long time view it as a function, a commercial function. Others view it as a tactic. So this is the thing about sales enablement. As it's growing and growing, and because it's such a new role, really starting in 2008, 2010, there are a lot of different perspectives. So these perspectives matter. If you work to drive transactions with the thinking of, hey, we got to communicate in the market, that's one thing. If you work to sell outcomes to customers and clients, that's a completely different thing. The difference is dramatically different. The work you do is completely 180 degrees different. And that's from Scott Santucci, who's a founder of the Sales Enablement Society and Growth Enablement Ecosystems. And when you look at this difference between simply communicating in a market and having people buy versus, hey, what does it mean to make our customers successful? What does it mean to drive outcomes with them? That is a completely different thing. And that's the challenge of sales enablement today is what are we signing up to do? What are we helping salespeople do? And there's so many perspectives. There's perspectives from marketing, perspectives from product, perspectives from the executive team, the investors, from customers, from sales training, from HR teams, even legal, business operations. There's so many perspectives on what it takes to help salespeople sell that it's one of those roles that has to bring those people together. It requires a certain skill set. So that's the backdrop of why sales enablement is exploding. These skills are needed. Executives view it as a must-have, and companies are evolving their products and services and solutions. And quite frankly, salespeople could use the help, not to be told what to do, but to simplify and make their lives easier. So what are the different types of sales enablement? What are the different types or domains of sales enablement? There are really two lenses. There are two biases. One is a project management bias. Sales enablement is about launching things and getting the projects done to a specific time at a specific moment in time, much like a project manager would. There's a bias around how we get this done, how we hit our end dates, how do we launch on time, how do we coordinate with people, how do we deconflict the schedule, how do we fit this in the calendar, and that's very much a project management bias in sales enablement. Another bias is around orchestration. There's this idea of we understand the business strategy, we understand the sales strategy, we need to get it all to work together, and we need to orchestrate that. And that means we have to factor in marketing, sales, product, human resources, engineering, and we need to understand what's happening in the strategy view as well as what's happening today and tomorrow in that tactical view. We have to understand how to drive outcomes. We have to understand how to talk about and message and enroll people and sell a vision internally to get people who perhaps don't even work for us to see the power of working together, to all row with together at the same time, to want to achieve things that perhaps are not at the top of their list, but are at the top of the sales strategy list, those outcomes. So in that orchestration view, we're starting to see this shift in enablement to realize that orchestration is required to shift from the old way of tactical doing to an enablement view around orchestration to achieve the business strategy. And that's much like the same exact shift that's happening in sales teams. The sales teams are having to evolve as well. How are they evolving? They're moving from generating activity based on responding to demand, such as an RFP request or an inbound phone call. They're having to shift to actually co-create demand, to create something new with customers in an environment where those customers may not understand what they need to do to be successful. That idea of getting ahead of where customers need to be, of understanding what opportunities exist and helping shape those opportunities is the future of business-to-business selling. Not answering the phone and understanding there's already a funded initiative, that there's already budget, but actually getting ahead of that to shape that budget and to identify a problem that perhaps customers didn't even know they had, and getting people to agree on the vision, how to pursue that vision, how to work together to understand that vision, how to shape that vision, and take action on that vision. That's very much in the space of an undefined need, not a funded project. This is oftentimes not understood by most people in the organization, who assume that all salespeople have to do is show up, talk about the product, and a sale happens. However, salespeople today, especially the large, big, complex deals, are shaping this vision way ahead of the idea of having a budget approved. So that outcome, that point of view is critical. And this is why it's important as enablement to think in that way, because we also have to face that same challenge internally. We have to help people see it's not about a specific feature and function. We have to help people see that it's about the outcome. And that is a big shift. That's a huge shift that I have to keep reminding myself to do. It's so easy to just get things done in the inbox, but enablement is about helping skate to the puck and move to the future state, not just getting things done in that tactical view. So that means blending a lot. It means blending tactics, strategy, focusing on outcomes, breaking free of status quo, aligning people, aligning culture, understanding the structure of the sales organization, understanding the tactics that are important. There's a lot of variables that go into enablement other than what am I supposed to do today? What's on the wish list of our VPs of sales? It's not so much like, hey, what keeps you up at night, sales leaders. It's way beyond that today. It's more about understanding the go-to-market strategy, understanding what needs to happen, and helping people get there. And that is the key. It's a help, enable, support, help people get there with an accountability, realizing that we can't just make salespeople do whatever we want. It's not about fixing salespeople. We're not in the business of telling them what to do. We're in the business of simplifying the environment that they work within so they can be successful. It's not about fixing salespeople. It's about making that environment better. And that's where enablement is heading. And commercial teams need help with that. When I talk about commercial teams, I'm talking about sales teams, customer-facing teams, revenue teams, those teams that are talking to customers to drive those transactions, and they need a lot of help. There's processes that are in the way. There's constantly changing requirements. There's a challenge in getting quick wins and getting traction and understanding what the actual value proposition is. It's getting having a challenge in getting in front of internal resources, or even trying to be creative today. There's so much momentum in a digital environment to just get stuff done. It's really hard to just be creative. And a lot of what salespeople need to do today is to be creative, to figure out how to shape a vision with their customers. And they need that help. They need that help from enablement teams. So how do enablement teams help? Well, they talk about the people, from their how to align the people. They talk about what is sales productivity, what is the productivity of the sales enablement team. They talk about the processes in sales enablement and commercial enablement, and they talk about priorities. What is the priority of our function and of our role and of our team? Now you'll see on this slide, I'm talking about commercial enablement, and I'll explain, keep watching the video, how sales enablement is evolving. And I'll explain the different types of enablement. When you think about what salespeople need help with, it's balancing people, productivity, process, and priorities. And this is the same challenge that enablement leaders have, because the actual specific initiatives that salespeople have to deal with in order to overcome these gaps is massive. If you think about it, there's a lot of activities designed to help sales sell. This comes from the State of Sales Enablement research that you can find on orchestratesales.com. There's a long way to go around helping salespeople be successful. All of these jars get filled up on a daily basis. All of these random things all come out to help salespeople sell. Salespeople do all these things, and it gets overwhelming. And especially when you think about, how do we balance priorities? How do we balance people, productivity, and process? So these variables create a lot of friction. There's so many perspectives internally that salespeople don't know how to navigate that. So salespeople might say, how do we improve our sales cycle? How do we accelerate that? Which jars are going to help me do that? Or as a sales manager, what am I reinforcing? What are the jars helping me do? Or how do we sell more? That's an easy one, right? Go sell more. Go sell more. It's easy. How do we do that? And there's so many different jars, so many different initiatives, so many different perspectives internally. It's really difficult to figure it out. And salespeople just want to have a conversation with their customers. They want to shape a vision. They want to create momentum. They want people to take action, and they need help. So how does all this help salespeople actually have that conversation? And that's why enablement is evolving. So how specifically is it evolving? Well, that's a great question. Let's take a look. Sales enablement is evolving into 4 specific domains. The first domain is the talent enablement domain. That really focuses on the hire to retire process of salespeople and customer-facing people. So when you think about talent enablement, there's a whole end-to-end view of enabling that talent in sales. That's one specific domain of enablement. A lot of enablement teams spend their time in talent enablement. Another domain is message enablement, equipping salespeople with the right message to deliver. There's a lot of work that has to go into making a non-scripted, forced conversation happen, something that's organic, that can do the conversation dance with customers. That message and bringing that brand into a conversation is easier said than done, and there's a whole domain around message enablement. Another one is this idea of organizational enablement, focusing on how to help salespeople get the right type of support internally. The organizational alignment to process and the technology around that process is organizational enablement. That's in the top left. And then in the bottom right, this idea of pipeline enablement. What is the sales cycle? What are the sales process steps? How do we enable our pipeline and enable that pipeline to move faster and to be more successful? So that talent enablement, message enablement, pipeline enablement, and organizational enablement, all of these need to work together to help salespeople be successful. And that's the evolution of enablement today, is to be more clear on the ways in which you help salespeople, not just providing a bunch of random activity. It's getting so strategic and so valuable to companies that even venture capital companies have done the work to figure out what the impact is of working together in this way. If you notice, all of these components here require a lot of different perspectives. Product teams, messaging teams, marketing teams, brand teams, sales training teams, sales managers, sales people, SDRs, BDRs, account executives, account managers, product engineering, the field marketing team, the sales operations teams. All of them have to work together to make this work. So how do we know if that's working? Well, there's a new measurement that's been launched in the last 5 years that's been spearheaded by the venture capital company TCV. And TCV is behind the many specific startups that you know, like Uber and Airbnb. And they look at what's called the commercial ratio. And this is where enablement is heading. Sales enablement is evolving to drive this commercial ratio, which we call, at Orchestrate Sales, we call that commercial enablement. Commercial enablement is the blend of those 4 enablement domains into a business within a business, or a function that drives this commercial ratio. This commercial ratio, you can find out more at commercialratio.com. But when you think about it, sales and marketing need to work together to drive growth. So what the commercial ratio looks at is, for every sales and marketing dollar spent, does the company get a dollar back in growth? Most companies are woefully underneath that idea of a 1.0. Anything in the green zone is good, but most companies are around a 0.2. And as a 0.2, that means for every dollar invested in growth, they get 20 cents back. And that's not a very good return on investment. And this is why sales enablement is important to a lot of CEOs and investors. And that's why it's evolving. So what are the components of sales enablement? Well, I'm glad you asked. What are the components? Well, let's break it down. First of all, it has to do with what experience is the enablement function creating. What is the customer experience? What is the salesperson's experience? How many sales teams are you supporting? When you think about those experiences that sellers have with their customers, there's a lot to figure out. As I talked about in the previous segment, that's measurable, and you can measure that by the commercial ratio. Again, you can find out more about that at commercialratio.com. When you think about the experiences that salespeople need to have with their customers, they need to be able to translate the business strategy into sales strategy, They need to be able to integrate all the capabilities together so they can have a clear and compelling message. And then they need to activate action with their customers. That means that there's a lot to figure out. Well, how do they figure that out? Well, enablement can help with that. Pipeline enablement can help. Talent enablement can help. Message enablement can help. Organizational enablement can help. And then commercial enablement can help. Bring it all together into a unified view that simplifies it for salespeople. How does all that work? Well, blending people, process, information, and technology. We call that orchestration, and you can find out more at orchestratesales.com, where we're exploring what it takes to be able to pull this off and make this work. And we've had amazing successes and case studies. You should check it out at orchestratesales.com. So this is the landscape of enablement as it's evolving today in response to the digital economy, in response to virtual selling, in the response to customer experience and the expectations that buyers have and investors have. What does that mean? Well, it means sales enablement can mean a lot of different things. What does it mean to you? And what you'll find as you explore getting into this space is that there's a philosophical difference between sales enablement as a tactic and sales enablement as a strategy. You'll see that most of the job positions open right now are about tactical sales enablement, which is fine. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. It's a fast-moving field. There's a lot to do in the talent enablement, message enablement, pipeline enablement, organizational enablement. If people are not aligned into those domains, they're doing what we call response enablement, which means that they have the punch list of activities they need to get done by a certain calendar amount, and that's really evolved project management, helping sales. And there's a huge industry in response enablement. Where we're seeing this go, though, is into sales enablement and commercial enablement, where sales enablement leaders are providing services to salespeople in order to simplify. So what does that mean? Well, you'll see sales enablement's a technology. Is sales enablement technology? Absolutely. It totally is a technology. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You'll also see sales enablement as a skill. We want sales enablement skills. What's sales enablement skills, you might ask? Well, if somebody's a trainer and they're providing training on a virtual meeting, those are sales enablement skills that are in demand. I would prefer they say trainer, but I understand they're called sales enablement sometimes. So you really have to understand, is this a skill request or a technology request? Or perhaps it's a process. Is sales enablement a process? Absolutely, it's a process. It's a core business process to communicating value. Where companies are moving today is trying to understand what is that business process in support of sales conversations. Let that sink in. What's the business process behind getting access to talk to an executive? There's a business process behind that. So is sales enablement a process? Absolutely. Is sales enablement a role? Absolutely. It's a role that's either a doer or an orchestrator. And it's the difference between a project manager or an orchestrator. But yes, there are sales enablement roles. There are tactical sales enablement roles, and there are strategic sales enablement roles. What are some of the strategic roles? Well, roles that view enablement as a discipline. Is sales enablement a discipline? Absolutely. What do I mean by discipline? What I mean is the ability to execute strategically and tactically with structure, with order, with clarity, with a plan, and not be totally reactive. The discipline here is the discipline to be proactive, to pursue a vision. So is sales enablement a discipline inside of companies? Yes, it is. In every company? No. In a lot of companies? Yes, especially in companies that are cloud-based or digitally native, and they're focused on driving customer experience. Is sales enablement a function? Absolutely. What you'll find is there's not a lot of people running sales enablement as a function. They're running it as a role and underneath another function. This is a big disconnect for most people in sales enablement who say, well, there's sales in the title, so it must be a function. It's not in most companies. I'd say 80% of companies, it's not a function. So you have to be clear what you're trying to get into. Are you trying to get into sales enablement that is a function, which means it's like a business unit? It may not be a P&L, but it has a budget, it has a leadership, it has organizational structure, it's on the organizational chart. It may report into the CEO, the VP of sales, even in sales operations. It might be underneath the chief commercial officer, but that function has people, process, technologies, a budget, and is involved in the annual planning process. A lot of people are in roles and they don't have budget control. They're told to execute initiatives. So that's a role-based view or a skill-based view. And then finally, enablement as a capability. This is where enablement's going. Not a lot of companies are here. This is the future of enablement to drive growth. It's the idea of we're supporting the commercial ratio. We're tackling the growth ecosystem because we understand that we're in an interconnected world of enablement where people are connected through a lot of different mediums and they're driving growth together. So when you think about that, it's an ecosystem view. Systems thinking is big in this capability, the ability to prioritize, to drive communication, to explain the messages to the right customers, to the right buyers. This is an awareness that you cannot treat all salespeople the same. All sales motions are not the same. All sales roles are not the same. That there's a way in which the company needs to monetize its relationships, and enablement is a capability to make that happen. That's a very few inside of companies, but this is where we see at Orchestrate Sales the future of enablement. And I'll talk more about that in the next video. So how do you get into sales enablement? Well, if I haven't scared you away yet, no, it's a really exciting field. I think you would really, there's a lot to figure out. And I encourage you to ask the questions, to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. But how do you get into this profession? How do you get into this? Let's talk about that. I'm going to give you 9 tips to get into sales enablement. But first, a story. How did I get into sales enablement? Well, I was in sales. A lot of things happened. I realized that salespeople needed help, and I committed my life to helping salespeople be successful. I believe sales is critical to the growth of an organization. I believe sales is critical to the growth of an economy and to the well-being and safety of others. I think a lot of what we've considered progress has been through salespeople communicating something new and helping people see the value of it. And I believe in the power of sales and salespeople, and I wanted to help them. And I started in the field before enablement was even a thing. So over the last, 15 years or so, enablement has morphed, and it's become this role designed to help salespeople be successful. And it really takes a lot of awareness of what that means to get into that profession. I view it as a profession. I believe it'll soon be a VP of sales productivity role, and I'm passionately trying to drive that awareness. So if you want to get in, I would love for you to help elevate the profession, not just get into it because it has the word sales in the title and you think it's just a job security thing. And that's why a lot of people get into sales enablement. They think it's where all the action is. And that's true. But there's also a professional angle to this that I would love to invite you into. So to get into sales enablement, you have to define your skills and what services you're going to provide. Sales enablement by its nature is a problem-solving role. It's also a role designed to create content and create solutions, and it's a very creative role. If you're not somebody who can put yourself out there and try new things and get lots and lots of feedback, this job will be a tough job. This profession will be hard. But you have to really think about your core skills. Are you a creator? Are you somebody who likes to be creative and build things? Because a lot of what salespeople need help with is simplification and also creating new messages, etc. So it's a very creative role. That means you have to understand why you're in it. Again, if you're joining it and you want to get in because you believe it has a lot of career progression, etc., you have to think about what is the reason why. What's the passion that you have? Is it to serve others? Is it to help other people? Is it to learn more about the digital economy? What's your why? And I can tell you in sales enablement, if salespeople do not see and believe that you're trying to help them, they can see that coming from a mile away. So I would encourage you, your why, to really include helping salespeople. This is called sales enablement. I'd really encourage you to not take your eye off of that and to have that factored into your why you want to do this. You want other people to be successful. Also, take the time to link your skills to sales situations. Think about multi-million dollar purchases. Think about how deals get done. Take sales training courses. I am shocked at the number of sales enablement people who have never sold before, nor have they taken sales training, and I think that's a disservice to the profession. I think all sales enablement people need to understand the challenges of communicating value. And that means I would encourage you to link your skills to sales situations and ideally try to sell something. You try to sell. You get on the phones. You try to get a meeting. Do those things. Don't hide from it. Put yourself out there. Ask yourself to do what you're going to ask salespeople to do. That means you've got to look at your sales skills. A lot of sales enablement people, admittedly, are a little bit perhaps shy to have a sales conversation. They're going to have a hard time in the sales enablement profession if they're not used to speaking in front of people, if they're not used to holding a meeting, if they're not used to asking questions, communicating the value, all the things that sales enablement people ask salespeople to do, you should be able to do yourself. That's a key piece of the sales enablement role. That means you're going to have to be realistic. Sales enablement get a lot of pressure from salespeople because salespeople get a lot of pressure. They get a lot of pressure from customers. They get a lot of pressure from their leadership team. They get a lot of pressure from internal people like sales enablement. So sales is under a lot of pressure. That means sales enablement people should be under a lot of pressure too. If you're in it for quality of life, if you're in it to have a great career, that's one thing. To be successful with sales, you have to understand their environment. Some are in a high growth environment. Some are in an operational environment where it's hard to get things done. Some are scrambling for resources. Some salespeople are in an escalation environment where customers are escalating all the time. You really have to be able to get into that. If you want to be where the action is, there's the good side, which is the sales growth side, and then there's the struggles with growth. And a lot of companies are struggling with growth right now. So you have to have a thick skin, and you have to be realistic. You have to be a creator then. That means you need to be able to roll up your sleeves and try new things and get feedback on it. Don't be a shooter. Don't should on salespeople. Don't say, hey, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, and tell them what to do. If you haven't tried it yourself, it's going to be really hard to be authentically received by salespeople. So be a creator and roll up your sleeves to serve and roll up your sleeves to help them. That's how you're going to get into sales enablement, because people are going to see you as somebody who's willing to figure out the challenge. So the next one is do interviews. Reach out to people. Hey, I'm trying to get into sales enablement. I'd love to know more about it. Call me up. Drop me a line. I'll talk to you. There are other people who will too. Do the informational interviews. What's a day in your life? Show me your calendar. What are conversations you have? Just be curious, because that's the thing about sales enablement. It's a very curious role, because it has to work to figure out what's really happening and explore that reality. So think of yourself as a bit of a scout, somebody who's observing and scouting out what's happening, and build a technique to do that. And you might as well start that with your informational interviews to help you understand what's going on. In that way, you can also volunteer. You can volunteer with the Sales Enablement Society. You can volunteer at Orchestrate Sales. Join that. I encourage you to do that. And finally, work on your own message. Salespeople have to work on their message. They have to work with a lot of people to understand the message to deliver to customers. There's so many different buyer roles that have different perspectives. The salespeople have to work on that message. So you need to work on your message too, to get empathy for the challenge of coming up with a message. So what's your message? Why should somebody hire you? Why should they care? Why should they spend the time with you? Great, you want to get into sales enablement, but why does it matter to me? Why does it matter to the other person? This is the world of selling today. How do you even get people's attention? So this is the same challenge that salespeople have. Lean into that and figure that out by reaching out, trying new creative ways. This is what salespeople have to do too. So that's one way to do it. Do what they're doing. So what's the future of sales enablement? Let's talk about that. It's definitely evolving, as you heard in the other videos, and there's an evolution of maturity that's happening. If I were to take people, process, information, and technology and map it out, there are people who are building an emergent foundation in enablement. They're responding to requests, they're building out things, they're taking action, they're building that foundation to build an enablement function on. Then there are others who are building efficient processes in enablement. The process to figure out what to build and how to build it, the processes to come up with a way to add value to multiple sales teams, etc. Then there are sales enablement leaders that are building insight-driven sales enablement functions. They're understanding what the go-to-market is, and they're thinking about what's happening in the different industries that they sell into. They're figuring out how to build analytics and dashboards that help drive and collect specific insight. They're very intentional about closing feedback loops. That's the level 2 enablement functions. And then there's intelligent enablement functions, those that are using artificial intelligence and machine learning to understand what's happening in sales conversations. They're able to unpack sales conversations and understand what's happening as companies try to communicate value. They spend time to understand the buyer experience, to understand what's happening in different industries. They're mining phone calls, they're mining inside sales calls or BDR calls, SDR calls, and they're thinking about how to become more customer-centric. They're bringing together processes from marketing, processes from operations and sales enablement in order to help salespeople get what they need more quickly. They're providing a portfolio of technologies that help salespeople navigate accounts, especially strategic accounts, where much of the today's bookings and sales happen are in those strategic accounts. So they're spending a lot of time there. And they're moving from response enablement to commercial enablement to transform the commercial ecosystem, which is sales and marketing working together to drive a integrated view that aligns to growth. And what is growth today? It's the ability to communicate value, to bring together the right message, to do that, to have the right skills, the right tools, and to have that conversations with the right customers to drive those transactions. That's what sales enablement's evolving to, and that's the future of it. And no one person can do it alone. I think a lot of what people are struggling with today is the realization that enablement requires you to bring people together from across the company. And quite frankly, the company is not set up to do that. There are many silos within silos within silos. And enablement's designed by the function and by the vision of the role to cut across those silos. And there are different skills, there are different techniques, there's different types of leadership. There's this idea of how do you build the right type of momentum, the right type of teams, how do you get mind share, how do you get people who don't work for you to see these things. And this is the same challenge that salespeople have. Salespeople have the same problem that enablement people have. They have to affect change and drive momentum with people who don't necessarily see why. And that's exactly what sales enablement's challenge is today. It's bigger than any one person. How do we improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the sales team and the communicating the value that we're communicating through a lot of customer-facing teams? How do we translate, integrate, and activate? These are bigger than any one person. You can't just do it alone in your silo. So that's the evolution and the vision of enablement to bring all that together. The evolution also has to do with what executives are looking for. What are they looking for? Great question. Well, CEOs are looking for an enablement leader who clearly shows they understand the business and can plainly articulate how to solve these challenges that exist. This is what they're looking for. It might sound simple, but as you're hearing today in this overview and an explanation of how to get into the enablement field, you really need to understand how businesses work, how businesses make money. You got to be able to understand how they convert know-how into value. You need to understand how resources get allocated, how the planning process works, what the go-to-market strategies are, what business strategies are, what sales strategies are. These are business acumen challenges that a lot of enablement leaders need to overcome in order to be successful in the role. On top of that, they also have to understand how to create value and communicate value to executives, to managers, peers, and leaders as they work up, down, and across the organization, which means the evolution of the role has to do with orchestrating. Orchestrators connect the dots. Orchestrators are the emergent role in the digital economy. Enablement orchestrators focus on the mission and the goal of the company. They prioritize the right goals at the right moments. They drive results by design, not effort. They guide the narrative by confronting reality, unlock energy to create momentum, and catalyze change through collaboration. If you want to know more about an orchestrator role, you can find out at Orchestrate Sales, where there are a lot of free resources around how the role is evolving to drive go-to-market strategy in the new economy. The new economy, a digital economy, is about interconnection. It's about moving together across silos to bring together people, process, information, and technology. It's about creating a function and a capability that harnesses the value of multiple perspectives and simplifies the ecosystem for sales so they can drive more revenue. That's the value of commercial enablement, which is the future of sales enablement, to bring together all of these components to drive the commercial ecosystem forward, which is sales and marketing and sometimes service. So you might be asking yourself, can I even do this? Well, check out the resources at Orchestrate Sales. You can join and take the courses designed to help you be able to do this. You can also join the community of people who will help you do this. Also, if you want to do this, what are you going to lose? Well, think about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, where businesses are going. I believe that there is a need for orchestration and there's a need for this role that's accelerating. The challenge is around executing this way and making this a priority, and that's where the opportunity is. How much internal awareness do you need to drive to be able to get into this type of position? You have to drive a lot of awareness, not only of yourself and your value and your contribution, but also of enablement. Enablement itself is very misunderstood. So you're not going into a solid profession that has a lot of understanding. You're going into a very ambiguous and fluid, dynamic, changing role, and you're going to be new at it. So it's really important to spend the time to understand it. To get that, you're going to have to engage, as I talked about in the previous segment, you're going to have to engage to understand what enablement is, ask a lot of questions in order to drive that traction and get those results of getting feedback on the profession, feedback on your skills, understanding what you can do, and then maybe even take a sales position to help you get into it so you can drive sales results. You may actually need to go into sales first before you end up in enablement. And then think about, how do you work together to actually pull this off? When you think about how sales enablement is evolving, the actual success depends on the ability to interconnect and interrelate with others. No one person can do it alone. So you're going to have to be curious and put yourself out there. And I think that's the key to getting into enablement, is being aware of what you don't know and not pretending that you know everything. This is a key piece of enablement today. There are a lot of people pretending to know everything, and we're in an economy where not everything is knowable. So lean into that with humility and be humble and be curious. Be aware of what you don't know and ask for help. That's the type of enablement people that others are looking for. Those are the enablement people that they want to hire. If you have all the answers and you're very declarative and you come in as the expert, you're going to be disruptive. There's no one expert today. It has to do with bringing together those perspectives.